Hey, Tim.
Hey, Paul, how you doing?
I'm good. How you doing?
I'm doing fine. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you good. The picture looks good.
Awesome. I'll turn on some lights too. Give us a little fly tying feel over here. All right, I think I am all set up over here if you want to get rolling.
Yeah, I'm pretty well set up. We got a couple of people already signed on.
Oh,
I
cool.
see. I see Heather's on.
My wife is on. Yeah, she's the biggest critic out there right now. I see
Good.
Andrea Larco and a couple others.
Yes, she has awesome art, which is covering my wife's car partially, actually.
Yeah, Andrea, if you're still on, your sticker has been on the back of my truck for way too long. The problem with it is I feel like everybody knows where I'm fishing. So I need to tear it off, but I can't because it's yours. So keep doing that great stuff, Andrea.
Yeah, my wife has about 6 of the stickers on her car. She fell in love with just her whole style of art, and it works.
Yeah.
Oh, Frank he's got his question. He says he never used a slotted bead. And can you explain how to use it?
Yeah, of course. I guess while we're waiting for everyone else or for a few more people to show up, we're going to get started here in about 1 minute. So the gist of the slotted bead is pretty unique. We're tying today on jig hooks, and I'll just lower this camera angle a hair, and I think that should kind of help everybody out. Paul's going to have a little bit of a better view than mine. He's going to be zooming in, so he's using kind of the rear of his camera. I'm using the front. For a slotted bead, we're going to be using these jig hooks. There's a lot of really great jig hooks that are out there. The one that I'm going with today, it's a Hanak H 450. Now I'm tying on a size 10. It's just going to be a much larger size to simply help us out. But for this slotted bead, there's 2 holes that you insert the hook through, either a small one or this one that's almost rectangular. And by inserting it through the smaller bead and through that smaller point, it will actually kind of run up around the hook. And you can kind of wiggle that bead around so it kind of seats itself against that, typically around a 45 to a 60-degree angle at the eye. And what's great about having it there is that once this gets in the water, it tends to ride hook point up. So we have way fewer snags than we would otherwise. So that's kind of the perk of using it, Frank.
I'm trying to see if I can get it to focus on it.
Sure.
Just so you can see it on the hook. The slotted side, that open side is in the back there with the small circle in the front. And that just lets it, like Tim was explaining, fall right down onto that front of that jig hook, if you got it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Just like that. So that keeps that floating like that.
Oh, perfect.
Hopefully.
That's exactly it. Yeah, but not all the time necessarily.
Not all the time.
It's
no.
kind of the gist of it. I mean, this is what an Instagram Live, Frank. If you want more information about that, just reach out to either Paul or myself, and we will be more than happy to help you out with that. All right. Well, thanks, Paul, for having me on today. I know I want to first take a moment and thank Paul Ruzzo. He's here with Wise Wader, and it's part of the Jersey Shore Trout Unlimited. So that is awesome that he has kind of set this up to have us do a little Instagram Live while all of you out there probably are unshowered versus I had to get ready for this performance, if you want to call it that. But when Paul asked me to join tonight, we decided we're just going to tie a couple jig nymphs, a couple that have really worked for the last couple seasons for us. If you're tying at home, without a doubt, post them afterwards, tag me, tag Jersey Shore too, just so we can see exactly, what you're doing as well, or tie these afterwards. What's up, Freddie? What's up, Josh?
Hey, Josh.
So I guess, Paul, is there anything else you want to say before we get this rolling?
No. I know you said you want to see if we let the viewers choose the first fly. Both of us already put a hook in the vise with a different color bead head.
Yes. All right, so guys, what do you want to see first, the Cahill Frenchie or the Sneak Attack? You got a choice. First one to answer gets it. And if no one answers, we're in trouble.
Yeah.
So.
Squirmy. Josh does a squirmy.
Cool. I love it. All right, I'm not hearing anything from anybody. So it's the Cahill Frenchie or the Sneak Attack. Mop Attack is close enough. We will go with the Sneak Attack since you already have that one in your hook, Paul. How's that sound?
That sounds fine with me.
All right, cool. So, Paul, why don't you kind of run through what you're going to be using to tie, and then I'll go through what I'm doing.
All right. I know your instructions, Clay, called for black Krystal Flash. I don't have any black Krystal Flash, but I do have this Vivus body quill material, which is almost like the same thing. It's just a single strand. You could wind it onto a bobbin if you wanted to get it onto there. I'm just going to wrap it like a regular material that wouldn't be on a bobbin.
Okay.
But that's the start. I have a 14 hook in.
Okay.
And a 3mm bead, tungsten slotted bead. And for the dubbing, I forget what it actually said that you called for on the list.
You know, when we get there, I'll kind of go through all those dubbings. That's for sure, because it's really kind of like open-ended for that, and we don't have to, you know, pick it apart that much.
In the photo, it looked like an orangey color dubbing, so I got this little life cycle. Oh, that's way too close. This life cycle pack here, and I'm gonna go with that sulfur orange color that's sitting right there on top, because it just
Perfect.
It looked like, from the picture, it looked like it matched enough to me. So
awesome. Well, that sounds good. I can tell you for the thread that I'm going to be using, I have some black. It's Semperfli Nano Silk. It's what's nice about it, it's considered a size 18/0, which is super nice. It really lets you tie kind of more of a fine body for these things. For the tailing fibers, just like Paul was kind of mentioning, just using a little bit of Coq de Leon, nothing too crazy. The color that I prefer is a medium pardo. There's a lot of really great colors out there, but this is kind of one that is very, you know, useful and worthwhile to use on dry flies, on nymphs. Yeah, that's a nice one. A little lighter than the one I'm using, but it's going to still kind of accomplish the same thing. And kind of while I'm getting this locked into place, I think I told everybody I'm tying on a Hanak H 450. The 450 has a really, really wide shank. It's super nice. I just feel like I'm able to hook a lot of fish. There could be some concerns. You can kind of argue that you may be able to, you know, bounce some off occasionally, but on this hook, I really just had a lot of success over the last couple of years. And I basically, I've tied in my tailing fibers already, so I'm just a hair in front of Paul. And the comment that I'll kind of give everybody, as I was tying them in, I was pulling the fibers towards my end of the shank. And with each wrap, it was kind of helping to keep them running straight down the shank of the hook. I let my fibers go about the same length as the shank. Now you have to figure out what is the shank. For me, it's kind of like where the barb would be to about halfway through the bead. So to me, that's kind of the proportions that I'm looking for, but I do want those running straight down. Looks like Paul has got his in perfectly. And I kind of like the technique you're using, Paul, to just do a couple loose wraps and to kind of pull them right to where they should be.
I find that a little easier for myself because I have big thumbs and I have bad eyes. So it helps me just rather than lining it up beforehand, which actually I'm going to redo this completely because I feel like I can't keep the tips aligned. But rather than lining it up beforehand and putting the measurement back, I just find it for me, it's a little bit easier just to get that perfect, that length that you want on that tail to just pull it right where you want it. If you just
it's a really good technique. And while you're doing that, I'll kind of show everybody kind of my next step to give you kind of another little cheater technique. So you can watch either Paul tie in those tailing fibers or this next one. So for the body of this fly, I really want this to be super dark. That's why we call it the sneak attack. And we'll get into a little bit more about that. But I like black Krystal Flash. There's lots of different options that you can go with. But I'm folding the black Krystal Flash around my thread. I took 3 fibers here because it's a really large hook, just so you could see it a little better. But typically 2 would work. And then what I'm going to do is kind of take my thread and pull my thread up over the bead. And then I'm just going to run those fibers down so they're just right behind the bead. Then as I start to lock back, I've now locked them in at the front of the hook. So I basically saved time. I didn't run my thread back up. I'm not worried necessarily about wasting thread, but I don't want to create a bump at my tail. So if you've ever noticed that you've created a bump at your tail, it's probably because you're just making way too many thread wraps at that base, at that point. So by me doing that, I've kind of eliminated that. I have a really slender body now. So my fibers, I have now exactly 6 black fibers going straight off the rear. And then I'm just going to start winding back forward. And it comes down to how much of a taper you want. It seems like every couple of years I go back and forth. Some years I want a super, super major taper. Other years I don't want anything. I want it as slender as possible. Right now I'm kind of on a slight taper. I don't know about you, Paul, but that's kind of where I've been living.
Yeah, with this type of fly, I go with very, very little taper. I just feel like it helps it drop a little faster. And I just like the way it looks.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm actually trying to find my other bobbin holder right now, and I can't because I think it might come better off.
Okay,
Tie
cool.
this in with that, but I'm just gonna do what I got.
Yeah, go. I'm watching you now. It looks really good.
I decided to double over on that body quill to make it kind of fill up a little faster.
Yeah, well, it's nice to do that, especially if you're using like a high vis thread, because then it'll prevent it from showing through. You know, it really just, I don't think that's going to matter one way or another, because I know some people prefer a hotspot thread if you're going to use a lighter colored Thorax. To me, it's not the biggest deal in the world, but no, that looks good.
If I like to put a hotspot lately, I've been using just a little drop of the Solarez color. If it's not a piece of a little bit of dubbing, just one little drop of that, like the red Solarez, is just an awesome way to throw that in there.
Okay, I played with the colors a little bit. That black is just my favorite. And there's a couple weird colors, like a mustard color, that it looks ugly, but it just seems like it's a nice, kind of color that's worked for me. Yeah. What's up, Josh Pittsburgh? I heard the rumor is you have a new podcast / I don't know, YouTube video, and Joe's living in your driveway. I got a flurry of text messages the other day, man. I hope that's going okay. I hope you're charging Joe rent for living there. All right, while I'm waiting to hear back from my boy Josh, I'm going to just wrap my Krystal Flash fibers up through the body. I'm going to try my best to make what we call touching wraps, but there's about 6 fibers in there, so they're going to naturally just kind of cascade over one another. And you'll probably notice on the camera, it's going to be really, really slender. Can you go back and forth as you near the thorax just to help out that taper? Absolutely. And you'll notice I'll do that just a little bit to build it up. Once I get real close to that bead, I'm going to place 2 wraps over my Krystal Flash fibers to kind of trap them in place. And then here's kind of one more little tip for everybody out there. If I would just let go and try to cut them right now, they are going to look really ugly, and it's going to leave just a little piece of Krystal Flash sticking up, and I don't want that. Whenever we put a little bit of some type of UV resin next, they'll cure, and it will just be almost just a hard piece of plastic there that is not desirable. So I'm just going to take my fibers. I'm going to allow them to kind of lay down the body and then place a couple wraps over them. And now when I let go, you'll see my fibers are just shooting straight down. Knowing that they're shooting straight down the body makes it so much easier. I can now come in here, go for a nice little trim, get a couple more wraps to kind of clean that up. And now we're just going to apply some resin. Nice job, Paul. Looks good. I see Sergeant Bass Fisher Jr. The squad is in the house.
Nice.
And the Sarge is here. What's up, big guy? Nice to see everybody. The whole family's in today.
I didn't know Bear had her own.
Yeah, I think I saw that Joe had added that for his kiddos. I love this.
Oh, that's great.
All right, Paul, what kind of resin are you using on yours?
I'll give you one guess.
I pray it's bone dry. It better be.
It is, but the label came off, so that's
man.
what it is.
Well, I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say this. There's actually a new bone dry that we're testing right now. I made a mistake, and I shared it in a YouTube video. I think it was a video for a streamer, and I shared the bottle. Now, I'm not going to turn the bottle around the other way to show the label, but there is a new one coming out that I think, for those of you that are Solarez bone dry, fanatics like I am, just to give you a little teaser, there's a new one that will be coming out, and it's a little bit better than the previous one. But this one, I'm guessing it's the one that you use too, Paul. It's just the best. Just make sure you really try your best to get as much resin off of that brush as possible.
I usually just take the brush and I put a little drop of UV on my bodkin.
Yeah.
Because my brush kind of got messed up at one point. I don't really know what I did to it.
Oh, no.
But I'll show you in a second why.
Okay. While you're doing that, I'll put this on. I just get a little bit on the top. Let me see your brush. Oh, gosh.
Yeah.
Oh,
so I just put a little on my bodkin, and it works just as good.
Oh, it definitely would. Yeah, it definitely would.
But I saw that the new bottles that they have now are a little more, possibly a little better for the brush and everything else inside.
Well, they're going to be, again, I don't want to, I know I'll get yelled at by our Solarez rep. This is another top that we're going to be going to, and you can just drop it on there. They're really nice for different applications. I think the brush is perfect for so many applications, but it's also nice having that little squeezer. the one thing I will say, mine, I put it on basically for everyone who's out there kind of tying along. I want it just a little bit wet. So that's how it looks. If you ever have a little bit too much on, just grab a Post-it note, paper towel, just dab the bottom. Otherwise, I'm going to cure it. I wait for about 6 to 8 seconds on each side, kind of flip it. I am going to cover it. I don't want anything reflecting back towards my eyesight. I've heard from too many people that these UV rays are definitely not good for your eyes. So just be smart about this. I know Tim Flagler's got a really good video out there that he talks about, you know, how to use chemicals basically like resins appropriately. And it's definitely one that I will recommend to everybody else. I see Andrea from Italy is in the house. How you doing? All right, we are just about there. So this fly, as we start to finish this, I call this one the sneak attack. And I kind of was influenced by a gentleman from central Pennsylvania. His name's Rich Ferreira. And he ties some really great flies. He tied one on my YouTube channel. I've actually recorded him tying a few. And what I noticed about his flies, he would take these tiny hot spots and just jam them together, multiple colors. I really wanted that same effect, but without having to use so much dubbing. So that's why we're seeing just a very simple tail, that black Krystal Flash. I typically use the matte black bead. You can find those at Competitive Angler online. And then for the color, I will kind of flash through 2 or 3 of my favorite colors. So these are easily my favorites. One is, this is called Sybai dubbing. It's fine diamond, and the color is copper red. I just love this color. This is, you know, I've gone through a number of those packs.
That looks like a great dubbing.
Oh, it's awesome. This one's fine flash. It's not called Sybai, but I have a feeling it's very similar. I bought this one through Performance Flies. The color's red, but it has a little bit more orange in it. So you can kind of see just a slant lighter. If I had to choose one, I still love the copper red. Another color, this is called Bright Raspberry. This is another Sybai. Just a really, just a nice looking color.
Where do you find that, Dubby?
I bought those ones, I believe, through Competitive Angler. Yeah, he's my buddy Jake Adamovich owns that. He's building a new fly shop down in Tennessee, right on the South Holston River. But you can find all of his stuff online. And then I do have a couple Semperfli dubbings I've been trying out. One is it's called Ice Dub. It's peacock blue. It's been looking really nice. It works really well. And another one is like this raspberry color. I don't have the exact name right now in front of me. They're both Semperfli products. I love their products. I'm also an ambassador, so I do want to make that very clear. So basically, go for whatever color is going to really grab your attention. I'm going to go back to that Sybai, the copper red and the fine diamond. And when I apply this, I want just a tiny amount. I want to be able to make about 4 turns, somewhere around there. Since I'm using a larger hook for this Instagram Live, I'll apply just a tad more, but let's not go too crazy here.
If there's one theme I've noticed on all of the lives, this is the fourth one we've done so far here.
Yeah,
with the Jersey Shore TU. The common theme, there were dry flies before this, and now it's a nymph, but everyone says less dubbing is more.
That's for sure. Yeah, that is absolutely for sure. I was able to get about 4 turns, and I almost think that's too much. I'll live with it, but yeah, there's no doubt about it. And after that, if you have some super glue, like fly tire cement, you can throw it all over your thread. Bobbin is not liking me. And I'm just going to go right into a hand whip finish.
And you put that cement right on your thread?
Yeah, I apply the cement right to my thread. What's nice about this super glue, and a lot of these super glues that we can find nowadays, is that they have a brush on the end. So you can just place that directly on your thread and then just go right into your whip finish. You don't have to touch it. Really nice, and you know it's going to really keep everything nice and snug and tight in there. And then the last thing I like to do, I don't use a dubbing brush. I don't want to brush out these fibers. Instead, I take my scissors and I'm just going to go through and just cut them down a little bit more because I really do want this one dropping in the water column. It's not complete partagon. I mean, if we would have nothing but thread at this thorax point to get that partagon style going, but otherwise, this is really exactly how I'd be tying this one. This is the one that I fished yesterday. I was out yesterday for a couple hours. And so this is the one I would recommend for everybody else to kind of look into. Again, that's called the Sneak Attack. And I believe my newest YouTube video is featuring this one. Rob, looks nice. What was your dubbing you used again?
Rob?
Paul, I'm sorry.
It was life cycle nymph dubbing.
I like that.
I'm not even sure who makes it.
It looks good though.
But I think I picked this up at one of the symposiums.
Okay. Okay. All right. Thanks, Andrea. I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Wonder Wax. Paul
Awesome.
still has Wonder Wax.
That's why I said Paul. We'll blame it on him.
I am Paul. You said Rob.
Yeah, I'm saying Rob now.
Now you're all over the place.
This is just getting me. This is why I do YouTube videos. I can control exactly what I said. Delete it all out.
Everything out.
Hi, Gordy.
All right, Gordy, you're not too late. We've only died one fly so far, and
no,
we got more on the way.
No, we're doing really well. Does anyone have any questions for us before we go on to the second one?
Anybody have any questions even about fishing this fly and how different ways that people like to do it?
Hey, what's up,
hey,
Mike?
Michael.
How you doing? Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, Paul, because do you mind if I talk for another minute about that?
I can't stop you.
You can delete me. I'm sure of that. So
I won't do that.
We're just sneak
That's
attack.
what we're here for.
You're right. You're right. I like to tie this anywhere between sizes 12 down to a size 20. So keep that in mind. And whenever I'm using it in those larger sizes, we're talking 12s, 14s, occasionally 16s, I will then place this as my point fly. And that's the fly that really just goes to the end of your tippet. But I love to fish two flies, and I like to have a dropper fly. So I will fish this one in a dropper fly situation as well. Tend to be a little bit faster moving water depending on what's going on. And I'll fish it as a dropper, those sizes 16, 18, and 20. So I tend to keep, I don't know about you, I just like smaller flies in those dropper situations and larger flies on my point, typically, depending on the water types.
I typically, personally, don't fish more than one fly unless it's a dry dropper setup. I had one time where I had two nymphs sinking at the bottom, and I caught a fish. It was hooked up good, and then he jumped out of the water, and the tailing fly hooked him in the ass. And I immediately said, no, this is weird now. It's not coming in right now. And I got it in, and I saw where the hook was, and I just felt terrible, and I cut off the back fly, and I've since then been kind of steered away from it. I know I probably could get away with if I just made a longer drop from that fly, but I only do, unless it's a dry dropper setup, I only have the one fly, and I'll fish it as an indicator if it's a dry dropper.
Yeah, that makes sense. I know there was a question that came in. Would this be a bottom dragger or a dropper? The short answer is more of a dropper than a bottom dragger. The longer answer is, I think over the years, for those of us who've been in this for a while, and we've been hearing about Czech nymphing and Euro nymphing, that has started to evolve where some of the early flies that we were seeing publicized by people like the great George Daniel were really just heavily weighted flies that you would almost just drag on the bottom and just you'd suction cup up a bunch of trout, and they work really well, and they still do. A lot of people have kind of morphed into a lighter nymph system. I know Josh Miller was on this a little bit earlier. He's a member of Fly Fishing Team USA, and he has really just gotten me to stop using as much weight on my flies. Now, will I still carry some flies with some pretty big, slotted tungsten beads? Absolutely. But you probably noticed Paul and I didn't use any type of a wire on this to build it up to really get it deep, down. This is a size 10 that I'm tying on. But even if I tied this on a size 12, I wouldn't have a ton of weight on there. It would just be that tungsten and a really fine tippet to allow it to the bottom. And if I really need to get it down there, further, I'll probably put two flies on that are both a little bit more weighted versus just making one look just like a big slug down there. So I hope that kind of makes sense for everybody.
And again, as you said, this is a size 10 that you're tying on, but normally you wouldn't tie it that large. It's just more so for the visibility in the video purpose right now.
Yeah, you got it. All right, you ready to move on, Paul?
Yeah, I'm ready to go.
All right, let's get this next one in here. I'll get my camera back down. So the next fly we are going to be tying is called a Cahill Frenchie. Hey, what's up, big guy? How you doing? We got lots of great viewers in here. So the Cahill Frenchie, I kind of call this a traditional take on more of a modern fly. The Frenchie has been just a very popular fly. It's worked for so many people over the years. Whenever I look at the Frenchie, I see this kind of a generic pheasant tail with this giant hot spot at the front. And as I kind of examine the hot spot and think about it, orange has been my go-to Frenchie color over the years. Like that's just my number one. There's not a question about it. But then the more and more I think about it too, I'm fishing in waters that have a lot of mayflies. We're talking Cahills, Hendricksons, sulfurs, tricos later on. And whenever I think about the way that the life cycle of mayflies works, we have a fly that's as a nymph and it eventually emerges into an adult. Between those two phases, you have this kind of insect that as it's emerging, you have the adult that's trying to kind of get away from the dun. And at times you'll have this like little adult, which is in these brighter colors, trying to get away from this just drab colored nymph. And it pushes away the nymphal shuck. We have lots of variations that kind of represent that. I've kind of taken a play on that to tie a Frenchie with more of a representational thorax. Will you ever see an emerger on the bottom? No, not for a light Cahill. But there's something about this fly. I'm not sure if it just grabs the trout's attention whenever it's down there, that they kind of see it. They recognize that yellow from an extended light Cahill hatch. But it's one that's worked really well for me. I fished this one quite a bit over the years, and I'm really happy to share it with all of you. For this one, I'm going to be going with the same style Hanak H450 jig hook. I would fish this between a size 14 and an 18. I like a copper, slotted tungsten bead. And then for the thread, I would go with something like a Semperfli 12-aught Primrose or a Uni light Cahill, something like that. Those are kind of my go-tos. I'm just going to jam that against my bead until that bead kind of stops wiggling. Once it stops wiggling, my thread will start to come down my shank, and I can just remove the excess. Looking good over there, Paul. What hook are you using, Paul?
I have a Firehole 516 size 14.
Oh, cool. I've heard good stuff about those hooks.
Not bad.
Good.
I have a lot of them, so I haven't had any bad luck with them.
Fly Fishing Vet just asked about hook gap. I'm the exact same as you, Fly Fishing Vet. The hook style that I like is it's the Hanak H450. It's basically a super wide gap. It's not a cheap hook, but I've never had one of these bend out, especially in smaller sizes. It's my go-to. But then I'll also kind of counter with one of the top fly fishermen in the country. He's out in central Pennsylvania. His name's Pat Weiss. He uses nothing but the H400, it seems, which is just a much narrower gap. So I don't want to say it's personal preference, but whenever you have like the best in the world that are using a thinner one, I'm not sure what to tell you, but I tend to use the wider gap as well.
Yeah, one thing I noticed, and a reason why I think it would work better on the jig hooks, is the gap is measured from the shank to the hook. So when you add this bend in the front of the hook, you're almost closing that gap a bit.
Oh, yeah.
So if you have that wide gap hook, you're going to have a little more ability to hook up on the fish.
Absolutely.
When it comes down to it.
Yeah, thanks for pointing that out. For the tail, even though this is a Frenchie, and some people still are going back to tying the traditional pheasant tail, I still stick with Coq de Leon. I tend to go for about 3 to 6 fibers, depending on the size. I don't count how many fibers there are. Same as before, I want them to be about a shank length. For those of you who are new for this fly, the color is medium pardo. That's the one I like. And the tip that I shared last time, I'll share it again. I kind of lock my butt ends closer to the bead. And now I'm going to pinch my tail feathers and pull them my way. And as I pull them, and I'm not really aggressively, just lightly pulling them, then I'm wrapping my thread, touching wraps the whole way down the shank of the hook. And by doing that, it allows that thread to naturally rotate around the tailing fibers, lets them go straight down the shank of the hook.
And if you watched how I did it, it was completely different.
Perfect.
I do my I did it on the first fly, but if you missed it, I just do 2 loose wraps and pull the fibers to the length that I want them, and then just tie it back along and to get it locked in.
Hey, that works too. That works. For the wire on this one, I like something that almost blends in with the pheasant tail to make it a little bit more natural. This wire, for people who have not tried this, it's Semperfli tying wire. The size is 0.1 mm, just 1/10 of a millimeter. It's extremely fine, to the point where it's going to be tough for you to pick it up in this video. It's easily, you know, I mentioned earlier, I'm an ambassador for Semperfli. The reason that I joined them as an ambassador was because of that wire initially and their threads. But the wire was just so fine and it just worked so well for me. And they had such a variety of colors. That was kind of my main reason for going with them. So I'm just going to tie that in with a couple wraps. And actually, I'm going to, as I wind back forward, I'm going to do that so I'm not creating that bump at the tail. We don't want that bump there at all.
When you tie, I usually, when I'm putting a wire in, I start from the front and I shove the butt end of the wire into that slot.
Yeah, absolutely. The only downside of doing that is that you had to make a wind of your thread the whole way back to the bead, and now you're going back down. So you're just, potentially adding a little bit more. But
yeah,
we have such fine diameter threads today that we're so lucky about everything that we don't have to be that cognizant. But I'm with you. Whenever I use a little bit thicker wires, I'll place the wire in that slot too. It's a really nice little holding. Gordy, the wire that I prefer, it's called It's called tying wire from Semperfli, and it's 0.1 millimeter. I like the 0.2 for ribbing of larger flies, and then the 0.3 works really well for copper johns. You can kind of get away with it for the 0.2, but again, it's Semperfli tying wire. And you're more than welcome to reach out to me. My website's troutandfeather.com, and I can give you more information. Fly fishing bet. How important is the tail? So that's a really good question. In my mind, it's important for this one because if I'm arguing that this is representational of a mayfly nymph emerging towards an adult, a nymph has a tail. So to me, that's important. Does it act like a rudder and all that other stuff? Potentially, but depending in the waters that we're fishing this, if they're moving fast, I think that's going to have such a slight impact. It's not going to make a difference.
especially
Whenever
with the Coq de Leon fibers just so thin.
Yeah, I mean, when I'm fishing caddis patterns, I never put them on, and I can tell you more and more on a lot of my mayfly patterns, I'm not using them as much. So, yeah, you're kind of getting to a point. Is it just tradition, or is it actually representational of something? And I don't think any of us will ever find out for sure. But if you're hesitating about tying in tail fibers, I don't disagree with you at all, and you can do that. I prefer to have a tail just to be representational for this pattern.
I would say possibly if you ask a guy like our friend Josh Miller, who likes to crank out a ton of flies at a time, that it might not be that necessary as far as catching a fish all the time.
Yep.
But for us who enjoy sitting down and tying a few flies and don't necessarily where he's competing and needs to crank out however many dozen he needs to do at a time, it's a nice little accent that I don't think anybody could honestly answer whether or not it could catch more fish with or without a tail.
Yeah, I'm not sure. It comes down to confidence in the pattern. It comes down to, I mean, a lot of people, regardless if we're talking competitions, it does come down to confidence in what your belief is on the fly as well. And if you're looking at the fly and you're saying, I will not have confidence if there's a tail or not, then go with it. I definitely can agree with you there.
And that just like you said, confidence in your fly, it can also change the way you fish it. So it's as important as it is to you. That's how important it is, because if you don't have confidence in your fly, that can translate into your fishing and end up not fishing it as well. So it's really a personal thing, and personally, I like it. I like the way it looks. I don't think it's difficult to put it on. I just feel like it gives a little better representation of many of the bugs in the water. And anyone can argue that none of the bugs in the water have a hook coming out of their butt.
Yeah.
But
yeah. All right. I think we
like
this one. Let's jump on to the pheasant tail aspect of this. And speaking of tails, and if you have an old pheasant tail lying around that, just is not, it's seen better days, this is a perfect fly to use on that, because I have a number of them. I'm a hunter. Yeah. I mean, especially if you have any with broken tips, because we're not tying these in with the tips going out, using those as tailing fibers. Instead, what I prefer to do is simply hold them by the butt ends, trim the tips, and I'm going to tie them in by the tips. I'm going to kind of use your tail technique here, where I'm going to lock them in near the bead.
And about how many fibers of pheasant would you use for
Gosh,
like a 14. I know you're on a
we're
bigger
looking,
hook there.
yeah, we're looking for around 3 to 5.5 or somewhere in there. I mean, less is definitely more for this fly. The one thing about if you're able to get the center pheasant tails, they have these really fine barbules on them that move in the water, and so there is a reason that sometimes we have to pay up for pheasant tails, and it's because if you can get those little barbules on yours, they show some incredible movement, and you can see them in some macro photography. But whenever you have a really nice pheasant tail, you'll definitely see them there. And we're just going to lock that in down the shank of the hook the whole way to where we tied off our tail. And I'm just going to return my thread to the front. I'm not going to worry too much about any type of a taper on this one. Looking good. And then if you need to use hackle pliers or something along those lines to advance these forward, you can. I know some people who actually wind them around the wire too to help reinforce them earlier. Otherwise, I just prefer to take mine, wind forward, try our best not to allow any gaps.
I will say to the fly fishing vet who's saying he's wondering about the need for the tail too. One of my best fishing nymphs that I've tied that does not have a tail.
Yeah.
It in fact in its place has a spot of red Solarez.
Oh gosh.
Instead of a tail, I'd jump that on there, and I have had more production on fishing on that fly than any other fly that I think I've tied.
Oh, perfect. Well, listen, I'm just a step ahead of you, so I got them up to about halfway through the thorax. I locked them in place with about 3 wraps, 1 wrap in front, and I'm just going to trim them really close to the shank. Looks like you are right up there with me.
Yep.
Perfect. And now I'm just going to counter rib my wire. Mine is going to really blend in with this fly, which is why I like this brown color. I use it on a lot of my emergers that ride in the film. So it just gives them just a hint of a sparkle, and it really helps to reinforce this pheasant tail. I'll get up by the bead. Same thing as before, a couple wraps in front, a couple wraps over that wire. And then whenever you're using super fine wires, what's nice about them is I can make that final wrap over the wire, hold my thread tight, and I can helicopter it away. Or in the case of this Semperfli, because it is so fine, I can simply just pull it and it just tears right off. It's extremely fine wire.
Sorry to the people that are getting a headache as I keep banging on my camera as I'm tying this off.
Well, everyone doesn't know this, but Paul decided he has his camera facing the fly, so he's a little bit braver than I am.
It just gives me the ability to zoom in and keeps me off of the screen, which makes me happy.
That's because I don't think Paul showered today. That's why he's getting away with this. He's beating us here.
I did shower, but I didn't have to.
Oh man, well, good for you. Good for you. All right. Well, now we're kind of getting to our last couple steps. Basically, at this point, what I have right now is kind of a generic mayfly, and what we're going to do is add that hotspot, just like a Frenchie, except we're going to make that hotspot based on mayflies that could be in your local waterways. For the waterways that I fish in western to central Pennsylvania, whenever I travel anywhere around the country as well, some of the more prolific hatches include the Hendricksons. So we would add kind of a light gray thorax, the light Cahill, which is what we're going to be doing here in a moment, sulfurs or PMDs, so orange or yellow, depending on what area you're in and what size too. As we kind of move into the summer, we get lighter, and then eventually we have trichos. But this isn't one that I would necessarily recommend for the trichos. So I kind of went over the main ones. I have some Semperfli super fine dry fly dubbing that's really nice. And then my probably all-time favorite is from DRC. That's the Delaware River Club. They have this dubbing that they kind of use a number of colors and they blend it together. The color is pale yellow, and it's easily my favorite light Cahill dry fly style dubbing for Cahills, for sulfurs. When it gets wet, it just takes on some great coloration. I pulled out a giant hank to basically show everybody. But just like before, with dry fly dubbings, you should be able to form a very tight dubbing noodle, which is what I'm able to do here. And I'm looking for around maybe 3 wraps on a smaller hook. Since I'm using a larger one for demo purposes, I might get 5 turns. but let's not go too crazy here. I'm just going to start wrapping. 1, 2, 3. I might get a few more because this is a little bit larger hook. But I want just, we're talking almost like a yellow dot up at the front. Nothing more, nothing less, just to kind of show what's going on. I don't like flash up there. If I'm fishing a Frenchie, 100%. But this is going to be more of something that's going to be representing that stage as it's transitioning from a nymph to an adult. And you can just, we're hoping that the fish have been keying on that light yellow color for a period of a week, possibly 2 weeks. Paul, yours looks perfect. From that point, if you want to put some head cement, some super glue right onto your thread, you could apply it now, and then otherwise go right into your whip finish. There we go. And that is the finished Cahill Frenchie. Just been a really nice little pattern for me over the last few years, and I hope it works for all of you as well. Any questions or comments? I know most people have been kind of yelling them out as we've been going. Paul, nice job. That looks really good, man.
Yeah, just gotta fix this thread a little bit. I cut it rather than snipped it. I didn't do it quite good enough first.
No. Well, thank you, Tommy Lee. I appreciate it. I know Paul does as well. Anyone have any questions or any thoughts? And the only other fishing tips I'll give you for this one, I definitely fish this one as a point fly the majority of the time. When you're out there during an actual hatch, if the Cahills are hatching and you notice fish are starting to kind of splash and rise, then I will fish this in another, we'll say a variation, either without the bead or with a brass bead, not a tungsten, and fish it as the dropper. And you'll have a lot of fish taking that dropper pattern during the hatch. So just a really great one. Oh, nice to know it works in Indiana as well. Good, good, good. I have a YouTube video that I released on this one maybe 3 weeks ago. So if you just, do a YouTube search for Cahill Frenchie, you'll find that under my name.
And after this is all done today, when I post the recording up on YouTube, I'll have the links in the bio for all of his videos with the flies that we tied, as well as just his channel and his website for anybody that needs to find it that doesn't already know.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. And by the way, I know we mentioned this at the beginning. Anyone who's tying along with us, or if you tie me these afterwards over on the next week or so, post them, tag me, tag Jersey Shore TU, and we will absolutely reshare them. I want to see exactly what you guys are tying out there too. And if you have any other kind of cool variations that you've been kind of doing off of these ones, any offshoots, show them. I know, Paul, you were really good whenever you were sharing the story for this, and you were talking about if you don't have the exact materials, you don't have to go out and get them. There are lots of alternatives you can use for that too.
Yeah, like the first fly we tied was your sneak attack. It calls for black Krystal Flash. I got a black shiny thing here.
Yeah.
It's not Krystal Flash, but it works.
It works. Yeah, absolutely.
That's the one of the better things that people don't always think about, especially new fly tires might think, I gotta have. He tied it with black Krystal Flash. I gotta go run out to the store, check online, and get some black Krystal Flash.
I am that way as a fly tire. I think there's probably a lot of fly tires out there that you and I are saying right now. Now you don't need all this other stuff, but if I'm saying like, well, there's this color that I like of this, it's called this, and if anyone else held this up, I'd be like, that is the color that I want. In fact, I'm so anal.
Well, personally, that color looks awesome.
I won't buy this color. I'll buy every color they make in that line because that's the way how a lot of fly tires are. So for anyone out there who's anal like us, I get it. Even though I say you don't have to worry about it, I worry about it too. All right, let's go on to this third fly. Let's wrap this up, Paul.
Well, what's the third fly we're going to tie?
So the third fly, this is kind of a bonus fly for everybody. We're going to tie a fly that's called the stealth mode. This has been a really popular fly for me over the last few years. I released this one on YouTube, and a lot of other tyers who fish around the country and around the world have kind of latched onto this fly. Phil Raleigh, he's a good friend of mine. He, whenever he teaches his tying classes for Stillwater and for European nymphing, this is one of the flies that he always includes. It's one of those flies that I almost didn't want to kind of release because it's really been an effective one for me. So I'm just going to be tying this one on. Again, we're going to a jig nymph. This is the Hanak H 450 BL. That BL stands for barbless. Size is 14 down to a size 18. I tied it in size 20s, but you don't have to worry about that. I like a silver bead on this one. Silver was kind of that was my color a few years ago for almost all of my jig nymphs, and it seems like every year my favorite color bead shifts. Right now, you know, but that's the way it works.
You're not
so I
the
got
only
a
one.
silver bead, and then I would grab a thread with like a nice hotspot color thread. I'm using these Semperfli 12-aught threads. This is one that's called fluorescent pink, really nice. I'll hit it with a UV light to give everyone an idea. It's a fluorescent. They have another one that's called fluorescent orange. I love oranges. If I had, you know, two colors, it would definitely be between like a pink and an orange. For this one, I'm gonna go with that pink because I grabbed that one first. And same as before, I'm just gonna wrap right behind that bead. Do my best to lock it in place, build up a little thread dam. Once that bead stops rocking, I know I have it locked in place, and my thread will also just kind of naturally go down that little ramp.
How's a fluorescent green sound for the thread?
Oh, that sounds perfect. We'll tie two different ones. No, greens, that's another one of my favorites. It could kind of represent the Granum nymphs or the Granum caddis right now. So that's a great color. Yeah, and going back to the, I believe it was Fly Tying Vet, he asked the question, do you need tails or not? On this fly, I like to have a tail, but I can tell you, I know many people who fish this one, you know, a lot. Hi, James. And they don't fish this one with a tail. So this one is a little bit more optional. You know, call me a little bit more traditional, if you can call these flies traditional, and I prefer a tail on mine.
You can't call these flies traditional.
No. No.
I mean, you could, but a traditional, one of those traditional uptight people might be quite upset with you.
Well, trust me, I'm a Catskill guy too.
Oh, I love the Catskill flies, but
yeah. Tommy, I'm with you. Thread dam. Yeah, Tommy, I agree completely. The lead wrap is nice, but it just provides it gives a little bit too much weight. And what I'm kind of thinking about now is, as my own fishing has progressed in Euro nymphing or contact nymphing or whatever you want to call it, I want these flies to have just a little bit of movement on the bottom whenever they're down there. And if you have too much lead, too much wire, too much weight, they just turn into an anchor. There are times when that's a good thing. The majority of the time for my fishing, it's not, which is why I don't have it. Hey, thanks, James. I hope you're doing well too.
Going back to what you said before about not having the right materials and using different things, when I first started watching like your YouTube videos and some others about tying these jig nymphs, a lot of them had that lead wire in the front. I first was going off of pictures of them I saw and just tying something that looked similar, and I always did a thread dam because I thought that was just what you did. And then I saw the videos with the lead wire, and I panicked. I was tying them wrong the whole time. But
no, you weren't tying them wrong. No, there are still times that .010 wire I use. I definitely use it a lot. And I know, Paul, I believe you took a class of mine once, and I may have given everybody a spool of the 010 wire because that's what I was using at the time. And we caught a lot of fish on those flies. So I'm not bashing those. It's just, as your style morphs, you know, everything morphs with it. And I guess let's go on to a tail. I'm gonna tie on the Coq de Leon one more time. I'm looking for around 3 to 5 fibers.
The same color as the Pardo?
Yeah, I like that medium Pardo still. So I want it to be about the length of the shank of the hook. Should be extending straight out, and just trim away the butt fibers. Butt head on the fly. How's it going, man? Perfect, Paul. Those are nice scissors. Those look really nice.
Oh, these are great scissors.
Yeah,
I love these scissors. I got these at the symposium from Piero.
Yes.
Sinestro,
yeah, Sestino. Yeah, Pietro Sestino. Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
These are the best scissors I've ever owned. And I'm a bit of a scissor nerd. I'll buy them at every symposium. But I got these, and I think these might be the last ones I buy.
Oh, they're great ones. Yeah, I've heard nothing but good stuff about them. All right, well, now what I'm going to do, I'm going to take my thread, and I'm going to start to build up a pronounced hot spot right in front of the tail. So we've been talking for the last 45 minutes about not having a bump at our tail. And now we're going to create this bump right at our tail. Yeah, we're going to do exactly what we said we weren't going to do, because we're going to put what we call a rear hot spot on this fly.
Now, when you're doing yours, do you flatten out the thread to have it better controlled and not falling off of itself, or do you like to cord it up to get the bump faster?
I'm using a 12-aught wax, and it's pretty fine, so I don't have to worry so much about it. So in short, if you're using something like a uni thread or like an 8-aught or even a 6-aught, 100%, it's truly up to you. Sometimes when you have it corded, what Paul's saying is if I would look down on my spool, on my bobbin and spin it clockwise, it'll cord up and look more like a rope. Cording thread is very useful in a lot of situations. In this one, for me, it's just a pick 'em because we're going to be covering it with UV resin here in a moment. So it's not the biggest deal in the world. What I don't want it to run down and kind of distort my tailing fibers, if that makes sense.
Well, that's where I don't like the cording, because I feel like once you stack it on top, it tends to fall over. And
yeah, absolutely. No, but you can see mine must have been a little bit. My bobbin's starting to spin. All right, while that's going on, why don't you grab a piece of wire? Go with silver wire. I'm going to go with that 0.1 millimeter. It's going to be tough to see. This is called Semperfli tying wire. The color is bright silver, very fine, really easy to work with. And I'm just going to lock that in. And this one, I am going to kind of go with that same philosophy of what Paul had shared in the previous fly. I'm going to set the wire in the slot, and then I'm only going to make 2 wraps over. And that's it, because I really don't want a lot of thread kind of building up my fly. This is going to be one that, you know, we don't want that body to get too built up, and it can happen really fast on this pattern.
you got a nice little wire or like spool keeper, so your wires doesn't end up looking like this pile, right?
Oh gosh, you better get this Semperfli wire.
I don't know where the end is.
I
can't find the end. I'm just gonna have to cut out a chunk.
That's bad. You're doing fine.
Now I'm going to be pissed off later when I
that's okay.
keep using that wire and I'm having a teeny little piece that just falls off.
That's going to be terrible. I would say I feel bad for you, but
it's my own fault.
I've been there too. All right, and then the next material we're going to get, this is going to get to that stealth mode. I'm looking for a holographic black tinsel. This stuff is really cool. If you have not bought a spool of this, buy it. Semperfli sells some. Uni-Mylar sells it as well. The color is holographic black. They make a lot of colors. You know, an easy color people buy is holographic silver, but the holographic black has just enough flash, and it's nice and dark. You can use this, going back to that the first fly we tied, which was the sneak attack. You could use this for the body as well. And if you don't have this, you know, just like Paul and I've been saying all night, it's not critical. But if there are a couple things I would consider purchasing for your nymphs, that would be one, because it just gives a great color.
I'm going to go back and use the same material I used on the first one, because I do not have holographic.
That's fine. No, it's a tricky
got a little bit of black, and it's got a little bit of flash to it.
Yeah, that'll work. There's 2 different sizes on the one I'm using for those people who are interested in getting this. There's a 12 and a 14. 14 is the smaller size, 12 is the larger. And typically you would think, oh, we're going to go smaller. I like the larger size. It's a size number 12 because it takes less wraps to get to the front. So, you know, with that smaller size with 14, I've noticed if I'm in a rush, I'm trying to crank them out, I will have a little bit more gapping. In this case, I'm just going to wrap back a little bit to make sure I have everything in place. Wind forward over the butt. Now we're going to speed this up because we're getting down near time. I'm going to start making my body, which is simply that black holographic tinsel. If you have a little pink kind of butt popping up in the rear, it's exactly what you should have. So I'm going to lock this in tight against the bead with, again, just 2 wraps. I'm going to fold it down the base. Make 1 wrap just so it lays flat. Trim it away. And then I'm going to counter rib with my wire. You're going to really want to take your time with your wire for this one because it is going to show up. So if you're looking for appropriate spacing, just wind very slowly.
Is it necessary to counter wrap the wire?
No. No. I'm trying to think of something, but no. I think it's just, I'll be honest, it's a habit. I think it's a good habit to get into because then when you're tying other flies, you'll just always be used to counter, to at least protect that material. And in case you run out of resin, then you know for sure you have it protected in this one too. I got the wire kind of locked in the front. we can helicopter it away, or if you're using really fine wire, it will just break off. And before we add our dubbing, I'm just going to grab my Solarez, my bone dry. If you remember, we have some thread wraps really just exposed at the rear. So I'm going to coat everything with bone dry, including that thread, because that thread is really what's going to be the precious cargo here. For those of you who are just joining in right now, that thread is going to be a rear hotspot, which is something that some of you may be familiar with. If you're not, I can probably bet that a lot of your friends may not be fishing a rear hotspot like that. There are a couple patterns out there by people like Devin Olson that have a little bit more flash or something going on in the rear, and there's a reason. It's because it's different than everybody else's. Mine looks, I don't think I have too much excess on there, but I will just dab it a little bit. I'm going to hit it with my UV light. I'm covering my hook up because I don't want any of that light to reflect towards my eyes. And now we are kind of getting down to the last part of this fly. Hi, Justin. How you doing?
Look at the way that green looks under that light.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. I didn't see how mine looked. Oh, yeah, that pink is definitely showing. Oh, I love that. Anyway, to kind of finish this up, I like something like a black Krystal Flash. My favorite, this is now the second thing I'll tell you to consider getting. It's called Simon Peacock Dubbing. The color is peacock black. In central Pennsylvania, they call this basically trout crack. If you put this on your fly, it will catch fish. I'm not going to guarantee you of that. Hello, John DeMuth, just jumping in as I'm showing off one of my favorite dubbings. But we're going to wrap this in. I'm looking for maybe 2 to 3 turns of this one, of this Simon dubbing. We don't want a lot in there. We want just enough to kind of cover up any of those pink wraps at the thorax.
I actually just got a new dubbing. I'm opening for this right now that I think will be perfect.
Perfect.
Called Black Mosaic Peacock.
Ooh, I can't wait to see that.
It's from Nymph Master.
That looks nice.
It's kind of hard to see the colors in it on the picture, but
yeah,
it's nice.
Oh, awesome. I'm glad to hear that.
But it's difficult to use. I should put some wax on this thing.
Yeah, I'm not going to lie. I like mine better. All right, anyway, while Paul is struggling with his, I'm going to kind of look at mine right now. I don't have any really stray fibers. I don't want any stray fibers. Instead, I'm going to go right into a whip finish. At this point,
because we only got 2 minutes remaining, so
okay, good.
Well, be a whip finish, and that's it.
Now, if you want to put a head cement on your fly or on your thread prior to this, you definitely can. I'm going to stick with a pink thread. I'm not worried so much about that showing through because it's going to be sandwiched between my bead and my thorax. And otherwise, that is going to finish off this last fly. That was called the stealth mode. I know we kind of rushed at the end, but that's just another one of those patterns that you can crank out in a hurry. It's a really fun pattern. For all 3 of these flies, the Cahill Frenchie, the sneak attack, and the stealth mode, you can find all of those on my YouTube channel. Just search for Tim Cammisa or Trout and Feather, and they'll come up. Paul, that looks interesting. I'm not sure if I like that dubbing anymore. I was liking it, but I'm not sure what happened there at the end.
I think I got to just get a better handle on using it. I only took off because I literally just opened the package.
Okay.
So I think it's some of the stuff that settled.
So with that said, I'll tell everybody, get some Simon Peacock dubbing. Absolutely. So how much time do we have on this, Paul?
50 seconds, 45 seconds.
All right, great. Well, so for everyone else who's out there right now regarding the stealth mode, great pattern to fish as a point fly, especially. I don't fish this one so much as a dropper. I love this, again, sizes 14 to 18. And as we start to kind of wrap up and kind of finish this, major shout out to Paul Ruzzo. If you don't know much about Wise Wader fly fishing, he's got some great wading staffs. I will put a plug out for you. And also, thanks for having me on. For Jersey Shore Trout Unlimited. Please tell your club, Paul. I really appreciate it. You're doing a great job with their social media.
Thanks a lot, Tim. Thanks for coming on. Thanks everybody for signing on and tying with us. Tag us in your flies if you tied some up.